Welcome, Grade 7 Explorers. Gather around, get comfortable. Today, we're diving into a massive, cinematic explainer, kind of like a grand historical safari. You know how wildlife documentaries track majestic creatures across the savannah? Well, we're going to track the rise, the immense wealth, and the absolute power of one of history's most fascinating civilizations, the 14th century Kingdom of Mali. We've got a lot of secrets to uncover, step by step, so let's just dive right in. To get you totally prepped for your exam, we've mapped out our expedition into 3 main territories. First, the height of power. Second, the Golden Trek. And finally, architectural marvels. We're going to tackle exactly 24 crucial questions in perfect order. Let's hit the trail.
All right, Territory 1. Mali at the height of its power in the 14th century. Let's go.
Imagine stepping back into the 1300s. The air is buzzing with trade and markets are literally overflowing with gold. So, question 1. Just how large was the Kingdom of Mali compared to the rest of the world back then? Well, it was the second largest empire on the entire planet. Only the Mongol Empire was bigger. No way, right? Okay, question 2. Who was their most important king and when did he rule? That would be the legendary Mansa Musa, who ruled from 1312 to 1337. Which brings us right to question 3. What exactly does the word Mansa mean? It's pretty straightforward. It just means king. So Mansa Musa was literally King Musa.
Now, any massive empire needs food and, well, cash to survive. So for question 4, what crops did Mansa Musa encourage to promote agriculture? He pushed for farming cotton, beans, rice, and onions. Picture it, fields upon fields, a bustling sea of green. And question 5, how did Mali actually get so incredibly rich? The answer is just brilliant economics. They built their massive wealth by heavily taxing the import and export of 2 super prized commodities, salt and gold. They completely controlled those glittering trade routes.
Because of all this, Mansa Musa was a figure of absolute awe. And that brings us to question 6. What 2 nicknames did Mansa Musa have and what did they symbolize? You'd hear these names whispered in the streets. He was called Musa the Magnificent and the Lion of Mali. These weren't just fun nicknames. They were absolute symbols of royal power and unmatched bravery. But what about the man who came before the lion? Question 7 asks exactly that. Who was the king before Mansa Musa and what did he want to explore? That was King Aboubakar II, ruling around 1310. And his ambition? Honestly, it was staggering. He didn't just want to rule the land. He wanted to conquer the vast, terrifying, totally unknown waters of the Atlantic Ocean. This leads us to one of history's greatest mysteries. With question 8, what actually happened to Aboubakar II and his expedition? Well, he departed with a massive fleet of 400 wooden ships, sailed off into the horizon, and literally no one ever saw him again. Vanished. Some historians think they tragically drowned in the deep ocean, while others wonder if they might have actually successfully reached America. Such a crazy thought, right? Okay, back on solid ground. Question 9. Why was the Niger River so absolutely crucial to the Kingdom of Mali? Basically, think of the river as the life-giving artery of the whole empire. It was infinitely faster and easier to transport goods by boat along the winding river than trudging through the blazing desert. Plus, most towns were built right on its banks just to guarantee a constant supply of fresh drinking water. Moving right along to Territory 2. Mansa Musa's pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324, also known as the Golden Trek. Get ready, because this is probably the most extravagant road trip in human history. Starting with question 10, why did Mansa Musa undertake a pilgrimage to Mecca? Well, Mansa Musa was a deeply devout Muslim, and as a good Muslim, he was fulfilling his religious duty to make the pilgrimage, which is called a Hajj, to the holy city of Mecca. But listen, this wasn't just a quick weekend getaway. Question 11 asks, how far was the journey to Mecca and how long did it take? The sheer scale of this is mind-blowing. It was a 3,000-mile journey. That's 4,800 kilometers across totally unforgiving terrain. And it took a grueling 12 months, a full year, just to complete. Now for question 12, how many people made up Mansa Musa's retinue and what did his camels carry? Try to picture this in your head. 60,000 people marching across the massive sand dunes. We're talking soldiers, merchants, slaves. And right in the middle, groaning under the weight of unbelievable wealth, were 80 camels. And each one was carrying a mind-boggling 200 kilograms of gold. And here's the wild part. He didn't just hoard it. Question 13.
What was the consequence of Mansa Musa's generosity in Egypt, specifically in Cairo? You might want to sit down for this one. He gave away and spent so much gold on the poor that he actually crashed their local economy. The value of gold in Cairo just plummeted because it suddenly wasn't rare anymore. It literally took years for the market to recover. Talk about spending too much money.
But there's actually a pretty funny twist to all this legendary wealth, which we see in question 14. What did Mansa Musa have to do on his way back because his gold ran out? Well, ironically, the richest man in the world had given away so much of his fortune that he actually had to take out a loan. Yep, he had to borrow gold himself just to fund his trip back home.
Even while he was traveling, though, his impact was totally permanent. Question 15. What did Mansa Musa do everywhere he stopped during his journey? The man paid for the construction of a mosque. He left this brilliant, towering architectural footprint straight across the desert sands. Let's wrap up this epic road trip with questions 16, 17, and 18. Question 16, what impact did the trip have on European and Middle Eastern maps? Boom, Mali appeared on them for the very first time. He literally put his empire on the global map. Question 17, what did he bring back to Mali? He brought back brilliant scholars, master architects, and super valuable books. And question 18, why did this journey lead to more tax money? Because all this massive fame meant tons of foreign merchants wanted to come meet him. That led to a giant boom in trade and, as a result, deeply increased tax revenues for Mali. And that brings us to Territory 3, architectural marvels and the construction of the Great Mosque, known as Djingari Bear. Let's marvel at these towering structures they literally coaxed out of the earth. Question 19, who was the architect of the Great Mosque and how much was he paid? The master builder was Al Sahil. He was one of those brilliant minds Mansa Musa brought back from Mecca. And his paycheck? An absolutely massive 200 kilograms of gold just for the design. Now that is a lucrative contract. But what was this super expensive building actually made of? Question 20 asks, what materials were the Great Mosque's bricks made of? They used a really fascinating earthy recipe, basically mixing sand, limestone, clay, and water, then throwing in some straw and animal dung to bind it all together before baking them bone dry beneath the harsh African sun.
Let's explore its ingenious design with question 21. Name 3 important features of the Djingar Mosque. First off, it has incredibly thick walls that basically act as natural air conditioning, keeping the inside beautifully cool. Second, the place is massive, enough space to fit 2,000 Muslims at once. And third, it features these 2 towering minarets with wooden poles sticking right out of the sides. Those poles add structural strength, but they also serve as built-in ladders for climbing up there during repairs.
Speaking of repairs, question 22 poses an interesting dilemma. Why must the mosque's walls be regularly smeared with fresh mud? Well, the answer lies in the environment. The harsh sun and occasional beating rains easily weather away those sun-dried mud bricks. So, it requires the constant, loving care of the entire community to physically re-mud the walls and keep the whole structure standing tall.
Now let's look at a related architectural cousin. In question 23, what is unique about the Great Mosque of Djenné? Originally built in the 12th century and completed in its current form in 1907, it actually holds an absolutely legendary title. It is the largest structure in the entire world built completely out of mud. Seriously, a true marvel of human engineering. Because these structures are so delicate and, frankly, precious, we arrive at question 24. In what year were both of these mosques declared UNESCO World Heritage Sites? And why? That happened back in 1988. The global community stepped in to officially protect these mud brick wonders from damage, ensuring that future generations could continue to marvel at them, just like we are today.
And just like that, explorers, we've reached the end of our safari. You have successfully conquered all 24 questions, from the towering heaps of gold on the backs of camels to the sun-baked mud of the Great Mosque. I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to ponder before you head into your exam. If a 14th century empire built out of mud and gold can still captivate us and teach us so much today, what legacy are we building for the future? Thank you for joining me on this Explainer Grade 7's. Study hard and stay curious.